Hey everyone, welcome to another video by Simplilearn. In this video, Exploratory Data Analysis, we will teach you everything you need to know about exploratory data analysis, a field of machine learning which helps you understand your data more in depth. So, let's get started. Before we start with exploratory data analysis, what can you expect from this video? What's in it for you? First, we will explain the concept of exploratory data analysis and its uses to you. Then, we will look at the steps involved in exploratory data analysis with the help of a data set. And finally, we will move on to the exploratory data analysis demo, which will be done on a market analysis data set. So first, what exactly is exploratory data analysis? Exploratory data analysis is a data analytics process to understand the data in depth and to learn the different characteristics of data, often with visual means. This allows us to get a feel of our data better and find useful patterns in it. Exploratory data analysis refers to the critical process of performing initial investigations on data so as to discover patterns, spot anomalies, test hypotheses, and to check assumptions with the help of summary statistics and graphical representations. It is a good practice to understand the data first and try to gather as many insights as possible from it. EDA or exploratory data analysis is all about making sense of data in hand before getting dirty with it. Some of the reasons why we use exploratory data analysis is to remove irregularities and unnecessary values from data. These unnecessary values can have an adverse effect in our outcome and further delay the training time and computation power required to train our machine learning model. Furthermore, working with clean data is a best practice as you can better understand your data and know what to do with it and which model to use for it. It also helps us prepare our dataset for analysis by changing it and manipulating it as and how we require it to be. This means that at the end of the day, the dataset that we get has all of our desired columns and rows and is of the desired shape or format that is required for a particular machine learning algorithm. It also allows machine learning models to better predict on our dataset. Now again, if we don't have any unnecessary or unwanted values in our dataset, our machine learning model is not going to be learning from these values. These values don't actually teach anything to the model, but further serve to skew with the way that a machine learning model learns and hamper the accuracy of the final outcome. These unnecessary values are referred to as noise, and it simply means that these values don't teach anything of importance to a machine learning model, but only serve to ruin the final outcome. Again, because of exploratory data analysis and because our data is so clean, it helps us get more accurate results because our machine learning model is only learning what is right and what is necessary. It also helps us in choosing a better machine learning model. This is because once you worked with the data and you've performed exploratory data analysis, you are more aware of the nuances of your data and the underlying patterns in it. Some of these patterns can also be recognized by the naked eye. Exploratory data analysis is done with the help of visual as well as mathematical means. So at the end of the day, when you're done with it, you know your data better and you know which machine learning model will work the best on it. Data scientists can use exploratory analysis to ensure the results they produce are valid and applicable to any desired business outcomes and goals. EDA also helps stakeholders by confirming that they're asking the right questions. Once exploratory data analysis is complete and insights are drawn, its features can be used for more sophisticated data analysis or modeling. The main purpose of exploratory data analysis is to help look at data before making any assumptions. This will help us identify obvious errors and better understand patterns within the data itself, detect outliers or anomalous events, and find interesting relations among the variables. What are the different steps involved in exploratory data analysis, and how do we go about to performing it? Now, the first and honestly one of the most important steps of exploratory data analysis is data collection. Data collection is an important part of exploratory data analysis. It refers to the process of finding and loading data into our system. Good, reliable data can be found on various public sites or can be bought from private organizations. It is extremely important to have good data. It reduces the time spent on cleaning it, and it makes for a better machine learning model. Furthermore, it is very important that you get data from a good, reliable source. Otherwise, there's no point in performing machine learning on it, as any result you get will obviously be wrong. Now, data mainly arrives from a variety of sources, and your first responsibility is to collect it. But if you know your data better, then it's easy to use for further analysis. So, only collect the required data. Now, for research reasons, a substantial amount of data which is collected by the government or other public entities is made available. These data sets are referred to as public data because they do not require specific permissions to view. On the internet, public data is available on a variety of platforms. A large number of data sets are available for direct analysis, while others must be manually extracted and translated into an analysis ready format. On the other hand, data that is sensitive to organizations and consequently not available in the public domain is referred to as private data. Banking, telecommunications, retail, and the media are just a few of the major commercial sectors that significantly rely on data to make judgments. Many businesses are looking to use data analytics to help them make important choices. As business become more customer centric, they may use data insights to improve the customer experience while also streamlining their daily operations. Some organizations from where you can get good, reliable data are Kaggle, Machine Learning Repository or UCI, GitHub, and government data sites such as Open Government Data Platform of India and Open Government Data Platform of the USA. Kaggle has a lot of really good data sets, and people can work on these data sets and upload their notebooks. This means that not only do you get good data, you also get to look at code of people who worked on that data and get a better understanding of how to use that data. The same thing applies to GitHub. GitHub has a lot of repositories where people have uploaded data. However, just be careful and make sure that the data that you're looking at is reliable. Now, the machine learning repository and government data is pretty reliable and very useful. It might not be the most clean data, but you can be 100% sure that it has been collected from the most reliable of sources. All of these websites are free to use, and anyone can go and download any data set from these websites. Now, after you've collected your data, and before you start finding insights in it, it is very crucial that you clean it. Data cleaning refers to the process of removing unwanted variables and values from our data set and getting rid of any irregularities in it. Such irregularities can disproportionately skew our data and hence adversely affect the results. Irregularities are of many different types of the data. You can have missing values, incorrect formatting of data, incorrect headers, and anomalies or outliers. It is crucial that you remove missing values, outliers, and any unnecessary rows and columns that might arise. If there are missing values, then that means that the machine learning model will simply waste computational time going through every single row and trying to train on it. And if your data is not formatted correctly, then you might find it hard to input it into any machine learning model. When it comes to data, there are many sorts of quality issues And this is why data cleaning is one of the most time-consuming aspects of data analysis. These difficulties could make data analysis difficult, resulting in inaccuracies or inappropriate results. As a result, these issues must be addressed before data can be analyzed. Data cleaning is frequently done in an unplanned, difficult to define manner. This is because not every data is the same, and different data have their own specifications that are required. It is crucial that you carefully observe the data and look at it in depth before you go ahead and clean it and decide what values you should remove and which values you should keep. You also need to correct your rows and columns. To do this, you need to delete any incorrect rows. Extra rows should also be deleted. You should merge columns to create unique identifiers, and for extra data, you might have to split columns. If your columns are not named properly, then you have to name them properly. And you have to make sure that columns which are no longer needed are deleted so that the machine learning model does not learn from them. A lot of columns might not be aligned properly. Some columns might not be aligned properly and they may have shifted. So it's also important that you align mismatched columns. For missing values, you can either drop the columns or the rows which have missing values, or you can fill in the missing values with some other values. Let's also understand how exploratory data analysis is performed with the help of the housing dataset. This dataset can be downloaded from Kaggle. So before we start exploratory data analysis, we're going to start by importing all the necessary modules required to perform it. We have the pandas modules for working and manipulating datasets. We also have the Seaborn and Matplotlib modules imported for plotting graphs and for visual representation of data. The NumPy module will help us perform numerical calculations on our data, and the norm function from the SciPy stats module will help us perform normalization on our data. The standard scalar function from the scikit-learn module will help us standardize our data. And just to get a couple of statistical insights, we're also going to import the stats module from the SciPy library. So let's run this and import all of the necessary modules. Now that our various modules have been imported, let's import our data into our Python machine learning program. So the data has already been downloaded into my system and it's currently stored in the download folder and it has the name of train.csv. And as I said, this is the housing dataset on Kaggle. So let's run this and import our data. So this is what the data looks like. As you can see, it has a lot of columns and rows and some of them are very evidently not required. For example, the pool QC column is almost entirely consisting of missing values. The same goes for the fence and the miscellaneous column. So these are all columns that we'll have to look at. Or if you want, you can just drop these columns entirely and not use it when you're performing machine learning on this dataset. So now let's perform data cleaning. The first thing that we're going to take care of are the missing values. We can get the total number of missing values by using the isNull function on our pandas dataset. The isNull function will return two outputs. It will return 0 if the value is not missing, and it will return 1 if the value is missing. The isNull function will loop over every row in a single column and check if the value is missing or not. If the value is not missing, again it will return 0. If the value is missing, it will return 1. And what we're going to do is that we're going to find the sum of all of these values and then sort that in descending order. We're also going to calculate the percentage of missing values in our data set and then convert that into a different pandas data frame. So let's do this and see how many missing values we have. So as you can see, we have obtained the total number of missing values in different columns in our data set in descending order. Apart from this, we've also calculated what percentage of missing values each column contributes to. The highest percentage of missing values belongs to the pool QC column, which has almost 99% of missing values. The miscellaneous feature has 96% of missing values, and the alley feature has 93%. Up until the fireplace QC feature, all of these values have a very high number of missing values. And even fireplace QC, which has almost half of its column empty. This makes these columns virtually useless. So now let's deal with missing data. To deal with missing data, there are two different things that you can do. So how do we decide which values to drop and which ones to fill in? Now, we'll consider that when more than 15% of the data is missing, we should delete the corresponding variable and pretend that it never existed. This means that we will not try to do anything to fill the missing data in these cases. Now, according to this, there's this set of variables, as you can see, pool QC, misc feature, alley, fence, and fireplace Q, that we will have to delete, and even loft. None of these variables seem to be very important, since most of them are not aspects in which we think about when buying a house anyways. Moreover, when you look closer at the variables, we can see that variables like pool QC, misc features, and fireplace QU are strong candidates for outliers, as not every house will have this, and it'll disproportionately push up the price of a house. So it's alright for us to delete them. Another thing that you're gonna notice is that all of the garage variables here, like garage cont, type, BLT, finish, QAll, all of them have the same number of missing data. This probably refers to the same set of observations. Since this is the most important information regarding garage, it can be expressed by garage cars. And considering that we are just talking about 5% of missing data, we can just delete the mentioned garage X variables and apply the same logic for the basement variables over here. Because again, they're probably just talking about the same data. Now regarding these ones here, MASN, VNR and all, we can consider these variables to not be all of that essential. So to handle missing data, in this case, we'll delete all the variables with missing data, except the variable electrical. The reason we're not deleting electrical is because electrical only has one missing value. And one missing value is something that we can deal with. So let's do that and take a look at our final train data set. So as you can see over here, we've gotten rid of a lot of the previous columns. Initially, we had 81 columns, and after deleting all the columns which have missing values, we are left with 63 columns. Now, let's also get the statistical summary of our data. So here we have it. We've gotten the statistical summary of the sales price column. Over here, we can see that we have almost 1,500 data entries, and the mean sales price is about $180,000. This means that on an average, a single house sells for around $180,000. The standard deviation is 79. The standard deviation just tells us by how much our The standard deviation just tells us by how much our data differs from the mean. The minimum price that a house was sold for was around $34,900. And 25% of the houses sell for around $129,000, while 50% sell for around $163,000. 75% of the houses sell for $214,000 or under, and the maximum price in our data set that a house was sold for was around $755,000. So now we know what our sales price or what a final output variable looks like. Now that our data is clean, let's take a look at the next step in exploratory data analysis. The next step is called univariate analysis. In univariate analysis, we analyze the data of just one variable. A variable in our dataset refers to a single feature or a single column. We can do this with either graphical means or with non-graphical means by finding certain mathematical values in the data. Now, some graphical methods by which we can perform univariate analysis include histograms, which are nothing but bar plots in which the frequency of data is represented with rectangular bars. The height of the rectangular bars tells us how frequently the single data occurs in our dataset. This is what a histogram generally looks like. Over here, each data point on the x-axis, here in the case of sales price, has its corresponding value reflected on the y-axis depending on the height of its corresponding rectangle. Like over here, this point, which corresponds to this rectangle, has a value of somewhere above 8. We can also use box plots in which data is represented in the form of boxes. These boxes tell us the minimum and the maximum value in the range in which our data falls, both on the x-axis as well as on the y-axis. Now let's see how we can perform univariate analysis on our housing data set. In the housing data set, the first column that we'll be taking a look at is the sales price column. The reason we're looking at the sales price column is because it is the output variable that we have to predict using the input variables that are given to us. Now, first let's create a distribution plot of the sales price. So from this plot, we can tell a variety of things. We can see that this is a normal distribution. However, there's a slight deviation from the normal distribution. It also has positive skewness, which means that it's skewed towards the left side. And it has a peak, so it shows peakness. Now, let's see by how much it skews and the kurtosis associated with sales price. So we can see that it has a skewness of 1.88 and a kurtosis of 6.52. Now, because of this shape and because it has such a high degree of skewness, we know that it has a bunch of outliers present in it. The primary concern here is to establish a threshold that defines an observation as an outlier. To do this, we'll standardize the data. In this context, data standardization means converting data values to have a mean of 0 and a standard deviation of 1. So this is what our sales price column looks like after we've standardized it. From here, we can see that low range values are similar and not too far from 0. High range values, on the other hand, are very far from 0. And all of these 7s are really out of range. So this is what dealing with just one variable has told us. Now, to better understand our data, instead of just looking at one variable, we can use two variables and compare them. We can see how one variable affects another variable. After univariate analysis, we come to bivariate analysis. Here, we use two variables and compare them. This way, we can find out how one feature affects the other. Bivariate analysis can be done using scatter plots, which plot individual data points, or correlation matrices, which plot the correlation in terms of hues. You can also use box plots. This is what a scatter plot looks like. It has two separate variables, one on the x-axis and one on the y-axis. The scatter plot will tell us how the value of the variable on the x-axis corresponds to the value of the variable on the y-axis. And this is a correlation matrix. It tells us how different variables are correlated with each other or by how much they affect each other. So here you can see that the correlation is maximum between age and balance. This means that these two variables are the ones which are most dependent on each other, at least in terms of the two other variables that we're comparing. Now, let's take a look at different methods to perform bivariate analysis. So we've already taken a look at the sales price. Now, let's take a look at how sales price and the greater living area correspond to each other. So to do this, we've plotted a scatter plot with both of these variables, with the greater living area on the x-axis and the sales price on the y-axis. From this plot, we can see that two values with bigger, greater living areas seem strange and they're not following the crowd. These two values are these ones. We can speculate why this is happening. Over here, before, as you can see, the greater the living area, the more the sales price. But for these two values, the greater the living area, the lesser the sales price. This is going clearly against the norm of the rest of our data. Maybe it is because these two values refer to agricultural area, and that could explain the low price. In any case, these two values are outliers in our data. Hence, we can delete these two values. These two observations at the top are most probably the 7 somethings over here in the sales price, as they have the highest sales price. Now, while they have a huge amount of skewness and they look like special cases, they seem to be following the trend. And for that reason, we're just going to keep this in our data. So, after just one bivariate analysis, we've already found a couple of outliers and we can now delete them. So, over here we've deleted these 2 points. Now, let's also see how the total basement area corresponds with the sales price. Now, overall, most of these values seem to be corresponding pretty linearly with sales price. There's not a lot of deviation from the trend, apart from these 3 dots here. But because they still somewhat follow the trend, there's no real reason to delete them, and we can keep them. So far, all of these values that you've looked at were all numerical values. The sales price had numerical values as well as the basement surface area. The living area values were also numerical, and the sales price that we were comparing it with was numerical as well. But what do we do when we have to plot categorical values against numeric values? So over here, we're going to be taking a look at the overall QoL versus the sales price. We're going to plot this in the form of box plots to see how they correspond to each other. Again, they seem to be corresponding pretty linearly. As you can see, as the overall QoL increases, the sales price also increases. This looks more like an exponential curve, but it can also be plotted linearly. There aren't a lot of outliers, most of them just being here and here. So this is what bivariate analysis looks like. You're basically taking two different variables and comparing them with each other, usually with the help of graphical methods. Now, let's take a look at multivariate analysis. If univariate analysis was for one variable and bivariate analysis was for two, multivariate analysis refers to the analysis of more than two or many variables. This can be done with the help of a correlation matrix to see how well different values are correlated to each other. A correlation matrix is going to plot the correlation between different variables. Variables which are more correlated to each other or ones which affect each other to a greater degree are plotted in a reddish-orangish color, and variables which are less correlated to each other are plotted in a darker color. These correlation matrices are also called heat maps. Now, at first sight, you can see that there are two red colored squares. The first one refers to total basement SF. One here, which is almost completely white and correlated with the first floor SF. And the second one is this one, again, which is almost completely white, which is the greater living area, which corresponds to the total rooms available. Both of these cases, this as well as this, show how significant the correlation is between these two variables. The correlation is so strong that can indicate a situation of multi-collinearity. If we think about these variables, we can conclude that they give almost the same information. Heat maps are a great way to detect this kind of situation, and in problems dominated by feature selection like ours, they're an essential tool. This basically tells us that these four variables are so correlated to each other that we might even be able to drop one or more of them. Now, let's get the sales price correlation matrix to get the variables which are most correlated with sales price. So over here you can see that these are the number of variables which greatly affect the sales price. As we've already observed, overall QoL, the great living area, the GR living area, the basement area are strongly correlated with sales price. Garage cars and garage area are also some of the most strongly correlated variables. However, the number of cars that fit into the garage is a consequence of the garage area. Garage cars and garage area in this way are like twin brothers. You'll just never be able to distinguish them. Therefore, we just need one of these variables in our analysis. The total basement SF and first floor also seem to be twin brothers, as the total area which is covered by this first floor will be the same as the area which is covered by the basement. So from this we can conclude that we only need one of these variables and not both. And finally, we can see that year built is slightly correlated with sales price. So finally, let's create a pair plot consisting of all of these different variables. Now, pair plots are an amazing way to convey a lot of information in a short space. Basically, we can use it to create multiple different scatter plots between many variables in a very small space and get a general overview of what our data looks like. Now, one scatter plot which seems very interesting is the one between total basement SF and the GR living area, which is this scatter plot. In this figure, we can see that most of the dots draw almost a linear line, which acts like a border. It makes sense that the majority of the dots stay below that line. Basement areas can be equal to the above ground living area, but it is not expected to have a basement area which is bigger than the above ground living area. The plot between sales price and year built also can make us think. In the bottom of the dots cloud, we see what appears to be an exponential function in a way. We can also see the same tendency in the upper limit of the same dot cloud, so both here as well as here. You can also notice how the set of dots regarding the last years tend to stay above this limit. This means that prices are increasing way faster now than they were in the earlier years.
If getting your learning started is half the battle, what if you could do that for free? Visit SkillUp by Simplilearn. Click on the link in the description to know more.
So now that you've gotten a basic overview of how to perform exploratory data analysis. Let's use everything that we've learned to perform an exploratory data analysis demo. In this demo, we will be using a market analysis dataset to clean data and gather insights from it using exploratory data analysis and prepare it for future predictions. We'll start off this demo by importing all the necessary modules. The modules that we'll be importing in our Python program, first of all, is NumPy. Now, NumPy is a Python module which is used to perform numerical operations on data sets and arrays. Next, we'll also be importing the Pandas module. The Pandas module is used to easily manipulate data sets, and this is going to help us in cleaning up our data set. Then we'll also be importing Seaborn and Matplotlib, which are two Python libraries which are used for data visualization or for plotting graphs. So now all of our libraries have been imported. Now we're gonna do our data sourcing. So in this demo, we'll be using the market analysis data. We've already downloaded the data onto our system, and using Pandas, we're going to be reading the CSV file. CSV here stands for comma separated values. So this command pd.read CSV will read in this CSV file and store it in the form of a data set. Let's run this and see what our data looks like. So this is our data. As you can see, our data is very skewed. The column names, which is supposed to be on top over here, are actually contained in the first two rows. And this very top row just contains completely useless values which you don't need. Now from here you can see that we have 45,000 rows and we have 19 columns in our data set. And over here you can see that we have a lot of unknown values or missing values. So let's start with the first step of our exploratory data analysis, which is nothing but data cleaning. The first thing that we're going to do is that we're going to correct the header of our data set. We're going to put the values in these two rows here on top so that the columns have their proper names. And to do this, instead of importing our data completely, we're going to skip the first two rows as they're not needed at all. Yes, so this is what our dataset looks like after skipping the first two rows. As you can see, we've gotten rid of this top row, which has the column names, and the second row, which again has column names, but in a more fleshed out way. So here, instead of writing marital status, they've given 3 to 4 different words for the same column name. So we're just going to import our data set without the first two rows. Now our data looks so much better. Some of the columns here, as you can see, are customer ID, the age of the customer, the salary that they usually earn, their balance, their marital status, their job and their education, and a couple of other arbitrary terms which we may or may not need. Now we've gotten rid of the first two rows and our data looks relatively better, but that doesn't mean that it's clean by any means. So we're going to have to fix some of the rows and columns. Now here are some of the steps that we're going to be taking to fix our rows and columns. We're going to be deleting the summary row and columns in the data set. So we've already done this. We've already gotten rid of the summary rows here. Next, we're going to delete header and footer on every page. We're going to delete extra rows like blank rows, page numbers, etc. Or just things that we don't need. These are general steps that you are going to take while cleaning your data. Again, all of these steps depend on the data that you have, and you don't necessarily have to follow each and every one of them. The steps that you take at the end of the day comes down to what your data looks like. We can also merge different columns for better understanding of the data. And we can also split columns. Like in this case, job edu just means their job role and their education, right? So instead of having this in a single column, we can split it into two columns, one for job and one for education. And you have to add column names. It is extremely important to have column names in the data set. If you want to access a column, you want to drop it, or you want to work with a column in any capacity, the column has to have a name. You can always access columns by using data slicing, but it's always advisable to have column names for easy access. Now, to start cleaning our data, let's drop some values that we don't need. Here, customer ID is of no use. It's almost exactly the same as our row index over here. And if we want to access a customer, we can just use the row index itself instead of using the customer ID. There's no need of having customer ID at all. So in this case, we're going to be dropping customer ID. Now the in-place parameter in our data.drop function just makes sure that any edits that we're making to a data frame take place in the original data frame and are reflected in it immediately. So using this, you don't have to initialize a new data frame which is going to have customer ID dropped from it. In place will make sure that this takes place in our original data frame itself. Now another thing that we're going to be doing to clean up our data set is that we're going to be splitting the job education column into two different columns. So what we're going to do is we're going to have two columns, one is job and one is education. For the job column here, in this case, we're going to take the data in our job edu column, which is like the merged column over here, as you can see, this column. And we're going to use a function to extract the first word in this column, like this word. To do this, we're going to loop through every row and we're going to split the string which is present in this row. So as you can see here, every value in this column is in the form of a string, and the string has a comma in the middle which separates the job and the education qualification. We're going to split this string by the comma. So this is where your string will get split. It's going to get rid of the comma, and at the end of this function, you're going to have two words. One is technician in this case, and the other is secondary. Now for the job column, we're just going to use the first word, which is going to be present at the 0th index, which we're going to get after splitting our string. And for the education column, we're going to do the exact same. We're going to split the string and we're going to be using the second indexed item in this case, which are going to be these items, like the education parameter. So in this way, we have already extracted job and education in the form of two different columns. Now we are going to have to drop the job edu column. So splitting and adding two different columns does not actually change the job edu column. We're just extracting the data from this column and putting it in two different columns. But this column is still present in our data set and it is not required at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop the job edu column. And again, we're going to do in place. So the editing takes place in the data frame itself. And finally, we'll print the data set. So let's run all of these steps and see what our data set looks like. So the first thing that you would have noticed is that we don't have the customer ID column here anymore. The second thing that you would have noticed is that the job edu column is missing, and instead we have two columns which have been added at the very back, one for job and one for education. So now we again have 19 columns since we have dropped two columns and added two more. There. Now our data set, as you can see, looks so much better. All of the data is separated according to the unique set that it belongs in into different columns, and most of it is in the form of singular values and not comma separated, except the date and the month and everything. We'll work with that column also later on. Now our data still has a lot of missing values, like the P outcome has a lot of unknown variables, and there'll also be a lot of NaN values or missing values in our data set. Now there are three different types of missing values. One type of missing value is values which are missing completely at random and which do not depend on any other feature. Now another one is missing at random, and these values may be dependent on some other feature for as to why they are missing. And the last one is one which is not missing at random at all. They have a reason for why they are missing, and these types can give us further insight into our data set. So these are just the different types of missing values. Now let's see how many missing values we have in our data set. So what we're going to do is we're going to be using the isNull function on our data. And the isNull function has two outcomes. Either it returns a 0 value, which means that the value is not missing, or it returns a 1 value, which means that the value is missing. Now isNull will be applied to different columns in our data set. So it's going to loop through every column in our data set, and for each row which corresponds to that column, it's going to see if a value is missing. If a missing value is not present, then it's going to give us 0. And if a missing value is present, then it's going to give us 1. Now this will happen throughout the column, as I said. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the sum of all of these isNull values. And that's what we're doing here. This will tell us how many values are totally missing in each column in our data set. So let's run this. Now we've gotten a column-wise breakdown of the missing values in our data set. So over here, as you can see, age has 20 missing values, month has 50, and response has 30. And none of the other columns have a missing value. This is actually really favorable because this means that we can retain most of our rows and that we don't have to drop a lot of random values. Now age, if we don't have age, there's nothing you can really do about it except drop these records. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna, like drop all columns which do not have age in them. And then we're gonna again see how many total missing values are present in our dataset. So this is just one way of getting rid of missing values, where you drop all records of the missing value. So now we don't have any missing values left in the age column, but we still have missing values in the month and in the response column. Now another way to get rid of missing values is by filling in some other value in place of the missing value. So for this we impute values to the missing values, and this is what you're going to be doing for the month column. Now since the month column is of object type, let's calculate the mode of that column and impute those values to the missing value. So you can't see the mode here, just one sec. Print. Let's print the mode. The mode is nothing but the most commonly occurring value in our data. So in this case, the value which occurs most frequently in our month data column is the month of May 2017. So that's the value that we'll be using to replace all of the missing values in the month column. So over here, as you can see, we're calling the month column in our data set, and we're using the fill NA function to fill the mode of the month in this column. And then after that, we'll just get like the total number of null values in our month column and see how many there are. So here the most commonly occurring value is May 2017. And after filling in all of the null values in our month column, we don't get any null values in it. So now if you want to see what our data set looks like, we'll just take a look at it. So this is our month column. So as you can see, so far as we can see, there are no missing values in this. Now let's just take the sum of all null values in our data set and see how many null values are there. So as you can see, month again has no null value. The only column which has any null value in it is the response column. Now, if a customer hasn't filled out a response, there's nothing that we can really do about it. We're just going to be dropping all the corresponding rows in the response column which does not have a value filled in it. So here we go. Now we don't have any missing values. Let's just take a look at our data set again. So now as you can see, we have 45,161 rows, whereas initially we had 42,211 rows. So as you can see, we've dropped somewhere around 50 to 60 rows and gotten rid of all the missing values in our data set. And for the month column, as you remember, we've autofilled the values with the mode. Now let's see how we can handle outliers. First of all, what do you mean by outliers? Outliers are nothing but values that are far beyond the next nearest data points. In simple words, outliers are data values which are very skewed from the original data or which do not follow the trend that our data actually follows. These values occur in few numbers, but they have the capability of changing the entire outcome because sometimes they might change the mean or the mode or the median of the data. So they tend to skew the data and our values, our final outcome can be a little off. So we don't need outliers because they don't show us a trend. They're just noise in our data. Now, there are two types of outliers. The first type is univariate outliers, which are data points whose values lie beyond the range of expected values based on one variable. And we also have multivariate outliers whose values lie beyond the expected values when compared with another variable. So some values might not be outliers when you compare them to other values in the same column, but when you compare two different columns, that time you realize that you have a lot of outliers. Basically, these values come into play, multivariate outliers. They come into play when you have two variables or two columns whose data affects each other, whose data is dependent on the data in the other column. So in this case, when you take both of the columns together, that time you can see that there might be outliers which are present. So to handle these, we have univariate analysis, bivariate analysis, and multivariate analysis. Now, univariate analysis, as you already know, is when you take a single feature from your data set and analyze it. So we're going to start by doing this for the job status column in our data set. So over here, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at each different type of job that a person does. We're going to add up unique instances and then we're going to normalize it. And we're going to plot this in the form of a histogram. So here you go. Now looking at this bar graph, you will immediately come to know the different occupations that various people in a market analysis dataset perform. The least occurring value is that of unknown, where people haven't made their job status known. And the most occurring is blue collar, where people are working in blue collar jobs. Now the reason we normalize data is so that we can put it in like a comparable range. So using this bar graph, you just get to know which jobs are performed by more people and which jobs are performed by less people. So using data normalization, we organize data to appear similar across all records and fields. This makes it easier for us to compare data. Now another thing we can do is we can calculate the percentage of each education category. And this is basically what exploratory data analysis is. You take a look at certain columns which do not have very straightforward values. Like here, targeted and default will have yes or no values, very evidently. Same will go for housing and loans, but a lot of different columns, like in this case of marital status, or in the case of job and education, they'll have varying values and they'll have a lot of different values. So these are the columns, which might look interesting to you, and these are columns which you might want to further explore. So in exploratory data analysis, a lot of it is intuitive and a lot of it is just going through your data, applying different mathematical functions and graphs to better understand your data and to better see how your data is structured. This will give you a better insight into your data, and you can find a lot of various patterns in your data just with the help of your eye, without having to necessarily use a lot of mathematical functions or a lot of machine learning functions. So a lot of it is intuitive, and it's all about going through your data, making informed decisions based on it, and using different functions and different graphs and plots on it to, like better represent it and to better get it and better understand it. Because the more in depth you know your data, the better you know how to handle it and how to manipulate it and how to work with it. So the next column that we are going to be looking at is the education column. This also has a lot of various different values, and these are values which are going to have a huge range in them because we don't really know which values are in it. Now, the values that we've been looking at so far are all categorical. Categorical values are values which belong to a category. So here, as you can see, all of these are different categorical values, and all values in this column will fall only in these categories. Unlike the numbers which are going to be coming under, say, salary. So salary will take on a wide range of numerical values, and you can't really plot this in the form of categories because you'll have so many different values. So all you're going to have to do with numerical data is that, you're mostly going to have to plot it as a continuous graph or in the form of maybe a histogram or something. But the next column that we're going to be looking at is the education column. So again, let's do the same thing. Let's just take a look at the different types of educations that people have by counting individual occurrences of unique values in our column data set and normalizing it so that it's easier to see all the data and so that we have our data scaled with respective to each other. And over here, we're going to be representing it in the form of a pie chart. So you don't necessarily have to represent all of it in the form of a bar graph. You can also do it in the form of a pie plot. So over here, as you can see, a good amount of people, more than half in fact, have done their secondary education. A significantly lesser number have done tertiary education. So this is a little more than a quarter. And the remaining people have only completed their primary education. And some people did not want to disclose what kind of education they have. So a small amount of people who are in our data set have only completed their primary schooling. A huge number, a vast, overwhelming majority of them have completed their secondary education or have at least done, I guess, until 12th. And around a quarter, which is still a good significant portion, have finished college. And a very small amount did not want to disclose their education, or we just don't know their education qualification. Now let's also take a look at the salary column. So in our salary column, what we're going to be using is we're going to be using the describe function in Python. Now the describe function is going to give you mathematical insights about your column. It's going to tell you the mean of the column or the average salary that people are earning, in this case, the standard deviation, or by how much singular values differ from our mean value over here, the minimum value in our column, the maximum value in our column, the first 25th percentile, the 50th percentile, and the 75th percentile. Now the 25th percentile just means the range under which 25% of our data falls. So 25% of our data, when ordered in an ascending order, falls under 20,000, which means that it has a range from 0 to 20,000. 50% of our data falls under 60,000 and 75% of our data falls under 70,000. The maximum value that is present in our salary column is 1,20,000 and the minimum value is a salary of 0. So far all of these have been graphical methods. This is a non-graphical method of univariate analysis, and this gives us mathematical insights into our data. Next, we'll be doing bivariate analysis. Now, bivariate analysis, as the name suggests, is when we analyze two variables simultaneously and see how these two variables affect each other. The first type of bivariate analysis that you should be aware of is a numeric analysis, where both of our variables or both of our features are of numeric type. Now the first plot that we're going to be looking at, and this is a very graphical method of doing it, is we're going to be looking at a scatter plot. Now what a scatter plot does is, so over here, so far all the plots that you've looked at sum up individual values and plot them. This isn't what a scatter plot does. The scatter plot will plot every single data point which is present in your data set in the form of a dot. Now in this case, the scatter plot that we're going to be plotting is between our salary column and our balance column. And another one that we're going to be plotting is the age and the balance. So we're going to be basically plotting the income versus the savings, and the age versus the savings that people have at that age, or the balance that they have in their account at that age. So let's run this. Now in this case, the x-axis here is the salary and the y-axis here is the balance. So how are these values plotted? You know how you usually plot something against an x-axis and a y-axis is that you plot the values on the y-axis and you plot the corresponding value on the x-axis. So this means that people who have a balance of 20,000 usually have a salary which is ranging within this range, right? So a lot of them have a salary which is ranging from 0 to somewhere around 30,000. And very few, and you can call them outliers, have a salary which falls in 70,000 and the 60,000 range. And this is exactly how you read a scatter plot. So every value on the y-axis will have a corresponding value to it on the x-axis. The reason you can't see these dots here clearly is because all of this data is very close together. So this is the usual trend that you're going to be seeing in your data, because this is where your data is mostly clustered. These one or two values which are very separated from the rest of your data are outliers, and this is how they normally look on a graph. Now scatter plots are very good to look at outliers because every single data point is plotted individually. So if there are data points which are very far away from the rest of the data, or where majority of the data falls in, you immediately, just by looking at it, get to know that it's a outlier. So over here, as you can see, you have majority of the data for the balance of 1 lakh falling under the range of 0 to 50,000, and you have a couple of outliers where people who earn around 1 lakh have a balance of 1 lakh. Now another insight that you can draw just by looking at this scatter plot is where majority of your data lies. So majority of your data, as you can see, this line here is the longest and it's also the most dense. There are so many points here that this basically looks like a curved rectangle. So you know at this point that this line has some of the most data. So most of the balance that people have in their account according to their salary is around 1 lakh. Very few people have zero balance, and the people who do have zero balance, as you can see, they have a very less salary. So you can deduce that they use almost their entire salary for their cost of living expenses. This is also a very good way of finding out what the cost of living might be in the city that we're looking at. If this data has been collected from one city, then we know that the cost of living in the city for a single person is somewhere around 20,000. Now, another insight that we have here is that we've plotted a scatter plot between the balance and the age of people. So over here, as you can see, most of the balance that people have in their account is ranging from 0 to 20,000 depending on their age. So now, what is the main difference that you can see here between these two plots? The first thing is that this plot has very distinctive clusters of data, and over here the data is spread all around. The reason for this is that the salary values that we have in our x-axis, all of them have a very small range. Like people either earn 20,000 or they earn 60,000 or they earn somewhere around 50,000 or 55,000. The salary is not taking on a wide variety of values. Now, this is why our age versus balance graph looks so different. Because in the data that we've collected, people have a huge range in their age. So a lot more people are falling under the range of 20 to 30 with a lot more unique values. Like over here, as you can see, almost every single value between 20 to 30 has a point which corresponds to it on the has a point which corresponds to it on the y-axis. This just goes to show that our age column has a lot more range in it. Now, what are some insights that we can draw from this comparison between balance and age? So again, this gives us a better insight than this, because we get to know that a majority of people, irrespective of their age, have a bank balance ranging from 0 to 20,000, which means that they don't keep much in their banks. Now, significantly fewer amount of people have a bank balance which ranges from 20 to 40, and even fewer have a bank balance ranging from 40 to 60. So this is why you can see that 90% of our data falls under. And the rest of it is outliers where people have a very high bank balance. Now, people with the most bank balance, as you can see, are usually people who are aged 60, and the people with the least are the elderly, people around 90, and people around 20. These two age brackets have the least bank balance, and 60 has the most bank balance. Now, again, this is very similar to the data that you have here, where the salary of people corresponds to their bank balance, and majority of the data falls under 40,000. Another way to look at bivariate data is by plotting pair plots. We are basically going to be plotting two values together against each other, and again, most of these are scatter plots. So you're just going to be comparing different variables with each other simultaneously. Now, to plot pair plots, all that you have to do is given the different variables whose pair plots you want plotted. So what this function is going to do is it's gonna plot each of these variables on both the axes. So you're gonna have salary, balance and age on the y-axis, and age, balance and salary on the x-axis as well. Now, when you plot two variables which are the same with each other, all you're going to get is a histogram. And this is nothing but bivariate analysis, because you're only plotting one variable. In other cases, like salary and balance versus balance and salary, as you can see, these two plots are just inverses of each other. It's the same plot, but it's been turned on its side. So the best way to look at it is that you can take a look at any of these different plots, and you will understand how these two different variables correspond with each other. Now, these are all scatter plots only, but the difference is that we have more of them and all of them are next to each other, and we can compare more scatter plots like this. It becomes easier. Also, another thing that you can see is that all of them have the same scale. So it becomes easier for us to measure the data distribution. Now we've already seen salary versus balance and balance versus age, but one plot that we have not seen is age versus salary. So we can look at it right now over here. Now the salary of most people in the age group between 20 to 40, as you can see, falls under 0 to, we can say, around 20,000. You can easily see this because a lot more data points are concentrated in this region. The next highest salary that a lot of people in this age bracket are earning is around 50,000, and very few people are earning 1 lakh and over. The same can be said for the age bracket 40 to 60, but again the data here is very uniformly distributed, but fewer people are earning between 0 to 20,000 in this range. So especially over here, especially in this cluster, as you can see, this cluster falls between 20 to 30, and this cluster is going to be somewhere around 10,000. This value is not plotted, but it's going to be 10,000 or under, and this does not extend beyond 30. So you immediately realize that no one over the age of 30 is really earning 10,000. Most of them are earning in the range of 0 to around 20,000. Now people earning 50,000 to around 70,000 again fall in all age brackets, but they're most concentrated below the age of 70 to 75. Another way to do bivariate or multivariate analysis is by using a correlation matrix. Now a correlation matrix is just going to tell you the correlation between different variables in our data, and as you can see here, realizing the correlation between different variables is relatively easy because all the correlations have different colors in them. So values which are more correlated to each other are going to have a darker shade, and you can see this by this color palette which is shown to the right. So by this you can see that the two variables which are most correlated to each other or which most affect each other are age and balance. Now let's take a look at the numeric categorical analysis, where we compare one variable which has a numeric value and one variable which has categorical values with each other. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be finding the mean of the salary with respect to the response of no and yes separately. So this is the mean salary of the people who've said no and the mean salary of the people who've replied yes. Now we can do the same thing with median. Now median is nothing but the middle value in our data. So here we can see that the median salary or the middle value of the salary of the people who've responded no is 60,000 and the people who've responded yes is also 60,000. Let's plot box plots for yes and no responses with respect to salary. So this is what we get. We can see that majority of the people who've given a response of no have a salary which falls within the range of 20 to around 70,000, and majority of the people who've given a response of yes have a salary range from around 55,000 to around 1 lakh. So this is another way of doing categorical versus numerical analysis, where we take categorical values or values which fall at a category and correlate them to a numeric column. And the final type of bivariate analysis is categorical to categorical analysis, where you're going to be looking at two columns which have categorical values in them. Now in this case, since our target variable is the response rate, we will see how different categories like education, marital status, all of these are associated with the response rate. So instead of yes or no values, we're going to be converting them to 1 and 0. And by doing this, we're going to get a new column called the response rate column. So over here we have 39,876 people who said no, and that is how many values of 0 we have. And we have 5,285 people who've said yes, and that's how many yes values we have in this case. Now let's plot a bar graph of marital status with the average value of response rate. So this is the response rate, and this is how the marital status corresponds to the response rate. Again, remember, this is the average value. So from this graph, we can infer that the positive response is more for single status members in our data set. And in the same way, we can plot graphs for loan versus response rate and housing loans versus response rate. So let's do that also. Let's just take a look at how loans vary with the response rate. So data.group by, let's just take a look at the name, exact name of our loan column. So it's loan, right? So majority of the people who gave a positive response have not taken a loan, and less than half of the people who gave a positive response have taken a loan. So in this way, you can check how different categorical columns correlate to the response rate, which is also a categorical column in this case. The final type of analysis that we're going to be looking at is a multivariate analysis. Multivariate analysis is done by taking more than 2 variables or columns into consideration from a data set. So here we're going to see how education, marital, and response rate vary with respect to each other. To begin with, we're going to create a pivot table with 3 columns, and after that we're going to use this table to create a heat map. So this is what our pivot table looks like. Over here we've got the marital status as our columns, and we've got the education as our row value. And finally, this is the heat map that we get. Based on this heat map, we can see that the married people with primary education are less likely to respond positively for the survey, and single people with tertiary education are most likely to respond positively to the survey. So now, using exploratory data analysis, you found how different variables and columns correspond to each other, what are different mathematical inferences that can be obtained from different columns. Everything that we've showed you here in this video are just simple tips and tricks which can be applied to different data sets. But that doesn't mean that what worked for this data set is also going to work for the data set that you're going to be using. These are just things that you can do when faced with a certain type of data which is given to you. But at the end of the day, the only way that you will get better at exploratory data analysis is by honing your intuition for data, by working with lots of data sets and doing exploratory data analysis on all of them. Above all, it is very important to look at your data, your graphs, and your mathematical inferences in depth, and to sit and analyze them in depth to better understand what information they all convey. And with that, we come to the end of this video on exploratory data analysis. We hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, a thumbs up would be really appreciated. Also, here's your reminder to subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon for more on the latest technologies and trends. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more from Simply Learn.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simply Learn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.